Next for your consideration is Senate Joint Resolution 101, and if passed by the legislature and approved by voters in November of 2026, SGR 101 will result in a constitutional amendment that changes signature gathering requirements for initiatives and referenda. Currently, the Idaho State Constitution requires an equivalent of 6% of legal voters statewide to sign a petition in order to place a question on the ballot. That amounts to about 70,000 signatures within a 2 million resident state. Today, those 70,000 signatures need only come from 18 of our 35 legislative districts. If passed by the legislature and approved by the people, SGR 101 will require the same total number of signatures, but instead of getting those 70,000 or so signatures from just 18 districts in Idaho, the change will require 6% to be gathered in each of the 35 legislative districts, adding up to the same total number as required today. The problem SGR 101 addresses is one where wealthy elites who don't even live here are easily able to buy their way onto the ballot in Idaho. By way of example, we need only look to Proposition 1 from last year. The $5.5 million spent by Prop 1 advocates primarily came from the pockets of veritable carpetbaggers from other states.
And $10 million
not only
from
don't live here,
Vandersloot.
they don't vote here, and they don't raise their families here. And they still try to exert their will upon the residents of our state. Fortunately, people in Idaho saw through that and resoundingly defeated Prop 1 by a 70-30 margin.
Yeah, thanks to Vandersloot.
Not only did that vote serve
money.
to defeat Prop 1, it was arguably a mandate against big money special interest groups from other states who try to change Idaho's laws. Passage of SGR 101 will make that more difficult. At the same time, the changes in SGR 101 won't increase the total number of signatures required. Instead, the changes will preserve for the people of the state of Idaho similar access to the ballot, while also ensuring that residents from around the state participate equally in the initiative process. It's important to consider the history of the initiative process here in Idaho. When the initiative process was conceived and written in 1912, it was arguably much harder to gather the requisite number of signatures to qualify a measure for the ballot than it is today. People were still getting around with horses and buggies. There was no internet, no television, no cell phones, and no social media. In short, it was a lot harder to organize, especially over a vast geographical area like the state of Idaho. This is one of the main reasons why signatures from around the state were not required at that time. But times have changed, and unless we change the initiative process to be consistent with modern technology, the original requirements will continue to be abused by these big money special interests who really have no business exerting their will over the residents of this state. Now, for those of you who weren't in the legislature in 2021, I think it's important that you know that these provisions were passed into law at that time and then overturned by the Supreme Court that same year. What the Supreme Court decided was that it would be improper for the legislature on its own to restrict the initiative process. But what they also pointed out was that all political power is inherent to the people, meaning that the people can make this change. So that's all we're doing with SGR 101. We're simply putting the question on the ballot so that the people can decide if this is the way they'd like to address these big money special interests who are abusing our outdated system simply because they can afford to do it. Contrary to what some are claiming, it's entirely constitutional for the people to make this change.
$64 million
brought this section of the Constitution into existence in 1912, and they can take it out
every
and
2
change
years
it as they see fit.
from outside groups,
Simply put,
mainly corporate
SGR
lobbies
101 is
and super
constitutional
PACs.
if the people pass it. I respectfully request your support for SGR 101 and the opportunity to let the people of Idaho decide this question. Happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ruckty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Konowitz. I appreciate you bringing up Senate Bill 1110 and the Supreme Court's decision to strike that down.
We've got some weird feedback going on. We're good? Go ahead,
Thank you.
Senator Ruckty.
Thank you. And the Supreme Court's decision to strike that down, I think your description of it missed a few key points the Supreme Court made, and I'd like to ask you a question about that, but let me summarize those. It was a 55-page ruling, and the Supreme Court concluded that requiring 6% of voters from all 35 legislative districts violates the Idaho Constitution because the initiative and referendum powers are fundamental rights reserved to the people of Idaho. The Supreme Court concluded that the standard set forth in Senate Bill 1110, which they struck down, but which is the same standard that you are now proposing we enshrine in the Constitution, was not reasonable or workable, and that requiring 6% of the legal voters from all 35 legislative districts gives every legislative district in the state veto power and turns a perceived fear of tyranny of the majority into an actual tyranny of the minority. You're proposing that we take the very language that the Supreme Court has concluded would render the initiative process meaningless and unworkable and unusable, and you're proposing that we actually put it into the Constitution. Why not just have a proposal for the people to vote on that says we will no longer have the initiative process?
Senator Conowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ruckty, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try and hit the high points.
Yeah, please do.
This is an attempt to not take away the initiative process and to leave it, to treat it with as light a touch as possible for actual residents to pursue initiatives and referenda if they so desire. In answer to your last question, that's why it's not just an attempt to repeal it outright. Secondly, the Supreme Court, many of those comments, I think, or statements were taken in different sections. As you said, it was a pretty long decision. And I don't recall precisely whether or not, but it strikes me that some of those may have come from the sections where they were justifying why the Supreme Court should be able to rule on the issue as opposed to what was wrong with anything. So the primary question in that ruling was whether or not the legislature should have the power to make this type of a change on its own. So at the same time, they argued over and over about that all political power is inherent to the people. I've also had two legislative attorneys opine that there's absolutely nothing unconstitutional about an approach with a resolution. The people created this provision of the Constitution. They have just as much power to take it out or amend it in any form or fashion they want. As to fundamental rights, I don't think we should get into mincing words, but just so people understand, I think, a little bit better, so they don't get twisted around the axle on that. Fundamental rights are typically things like the right to free speech or the right to be free from search and seizure.
Oh, here we go.
The right to initiative, and the difference between those two, for example, and the right to initiative is that the right to initiative is not in the U.S. Constitution. Only the prior two are, which is why I think something like less than half the states have an initiative process. So there's no fundamental right in the sense of the freedom of speech or something along those lines. I think that adjective kind of get bandied around a bit more than it should have. I'm not sure if that hits all the points, but I think those are the high ones.
Follow up, Senator Ruckty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Senator Conowitz. As I listen to your remarks, it strikes me that you're not really making an argument that the initiative process should be more difficult. You're making an argument against the initiative process itself. So again, my question to you is, why not just put before the people, as a constitutional amendment, the striking of the initiative process altogether?
Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome to answer that, Senator. I think we need to stick to the legislation that we're actually considering, but you're welcome to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ruckty, I'm saying the exact opposite of that. I'm not trying to repeal. I don't want an outright repeal. I think we need to preserve what we can for the people, and at the same time, try to address the abuse that's happening by big money special interests from other states who are buying their way onto the ballot. We just saw it last year. So that's what this is attempting to address. It's not an attempt to repeal. That would be a simpler argument.
Senator Ruckte?
Well, I suspect this issue is going to come up more in this discussion, Mr. Chairman. I guess my point is that the Supreme Court, it's not just me, it's the Supreme Court that has said that this very language removes the initiative process from the people. And so I think when I ask those questions, I'm not asking about a different bill. I'm asking about this bill, kind of like 2 + 1 = 3. I call it 2 + 1. Senator Okonowitz calls it 3, but they both are 3. So anyway, those are my questions. Thank you, Senator Okonowitz.
Senator Shippey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question would be, have you, excuse me, did I address you? I think I did.
Yeah, you're good.
Senator Okonowitz, the question is, have you received any requests from citizens that this be put on the ballot, or is this just simply your creation, your ambition? There's no heart in the people of your district. Are you responding to your voters that you represent?
Senator Okonowitz?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Shippey, yes, I've received innumerable contacts from people about what are we going to do about this issue. The Republican Party even has added to their platform a resolution to pursue initiative reform. So it's been widespread.
Senator Burnt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here this morning. Senator Okonowitz, would you agree or disagree that the process, the initiative process, is working, or is it not working, especially what we saw recently with Prop 1?
Senator Okonowitz?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Burt, I would say we have a problem. And the problem is that we're going to continue to see big money special interests who don't live here attempt to change the laws for us. And they're going to be for things like, well, Prop 1, marijuana, agricultural bills that we've seen restricting agricultural methods in California. We've seen other states like that. We've seen restrictions on gun rights and pro-life matters. So you're going to continue to see a barrage of money and initiatives flow into the state. And this doesn't stop that. It simply puts a few speed bumps in the way, and it ensures that they talk to everyone in the state and not just focus on a small geographical area in order to get the signatures required.
Senator Taves?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Okonowitz. I'm interested, and you may have mentioned this, but in the status quo, in the current system, how many counties would it be necessary to go and gather signatures in order to get the necessary number in the current situation versus what you're proposing, which I'm guessing in the proposal it would be all counties. Is that correct?
Senator Okonowitz?
Senator Guthrie, Chairman Guthrie, Senator Taves, I haven't examined county lines to that level of detail, so I can't say with certainty, but I suspect so. And as it sits right now, I believe you can get all the signatures required for a certain measure in roughly 4 counties out of 40 at this point. It's entirely, one is entirely able to focus on geographical areas depending on which end of the spectrum of the political spectrum they're coming from, in order to get the signatures required and sort of ignore the remainder of the state and not be required to get signatures in those areas. Now, remember, we're talking about something on the order of 2,000 signatures per district. There's 60,000 residents roughly in each district. This is not an overwhelming number. So I don't see an enormous problem at all. In fact, I don't see a problem at all. If this is actually an issue that the people want, it'd be quite easy, I think, for the people to come up with 2,000 signatures. On the other hand, if it's something that somebody's trying to buy their way onto the ballot, it'll be a little bit harder. They can still do it, I suppose, but we are trying to put a few speed bumps in their way.
I don't see any other questions. We'll go to some testimony, and as we do, let's just try to remember to speak to the legislation and be sensitive to personalities or those that are maybe bringing it. So with that, let's start out by Ryan Goldrick. And we're going to have to limit testimony to 2 minutes. We've got a lot of folks signed up. So introduce yourself for the record, who you represent, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Ryan McGoldrick, and I am here on behalf of Conservation Voters for Idaho to speak in opposition to this legislation. First thing I just want to say is Idaho is not California. In California, they might have dozens of ballot initiatives coming on every year, every other year. In Idaho, we have one maybe every 2 years. The most we've had recently is 2. So I don't think we should be limiting the ballot initiative process out of fear of something that might happen in the future. It is not currently a widespread. It's not like California. It's not all over the ballot. If it gets to that point, I think maybe there's a time to address it, but we're not currently experiencing that. Ballot initiatives in Idaho are currently extremely difficult to pass. In 2026, as Senator Okonowitz mentioned, it's 70,000 signatures at the next time it's on the ballot. But the number of signatures that will actually be gathered is going to be significantly higher than that because you have to go out and you have to try to gather signatures in every single district. They don't just pick out 18 districts and go to each of those districts and get all the signatures. If you want to qualify a ballot initiative, you need to go to as many districts as possible. So you end up with widespread representation. If you look at the maps of where signatures have been gathered, they come from all over the state. Another thing I want to mention is that they're already extremely rare. We've had in 113 years, we've only had 15 ballot initiatives pass. In the same amount of time, it's been about 40,000 pieces of legislation. So you can kind of see the difference there. And then finally, as I'm kind of running out of time, I just want to mention the point about out-of-state money. I think we all know as you require, as the threshold gets higher, I think you're going to need more out-of-state money to pass a ballot initiative. You're not going to be able to just collect signatures with a bunch of volunteers and just kind of a homegrown method. If you have to raise the threshold, you're going to need to pay people to come out and gather signatures. You're going to need to bring in a bunch of out-of-state money. So to me, this feels a lot more like an invitation on both sides to bring in out-of-state money. And if it gets on the ballot in 2026, I think you're going to see a significant amount of out-of-state money coming in on both sides to kind of fight on this issue. So with that, I'll finish.
Senator Taves has a
Senator
question.
Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goldrick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
So that last comment just caught me. Like, my thought process is that if there's an appetite for it and there's a lot of people that are wanting what the ballot initiative is after, wouldn't it be something where you could get volunteers in every district versus just a few? So I'm just trying to understand why you think it would cost more money.
Mr. McGoldrick?
Senator Taves, Chairman, I think because of the limitations, the time limitations, it takes a lot of time to recruit volunteers to do a ballot initiative now. Just in terms of the signature gathering number of hours, it's about 10,000 hours of volunteer time. That's not counting staff time for organizing them. It's not a lot of the training time. It's a heavy lift to try to get done in a short amount of time. So I think if you're having the same length of time and you're increasing, almost doubling the number of districts you need a door knock in, then you have to find a way to speed up that process, and it's going to end up being paid signature gatherers. And you're going to need more money to be able to do it faster. And usually kind of homegrown campaigns, it takes a lot of time to go door to door and talk to people and get, $20 from this person, $40 from this person. If a campaign needs to happen in a short amount of time, you need to bring in large donors to be able to get enough money to actually run that campaign. So by raising the threshold, it actually requires you to get larger donations and probably pay people to do that.
Senator Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGoldrick. So I just wanted to clarify to make sure I understand your position and the position of the Conservation Voters of Idaho that you're representing. So is it your position that there is nothing wrong with the ballot initiative process right now, or is it just that this specific way to address it is incorrect?
Mr. McGoldrick?
Thank you, Chairman and Senator Adams. Our position is that the current standard, I think, is a fair standard. And I think that's reflected by how voters feel. I know there was a poll from BSU that showed, it was a couple years ago, but that showed that a significant portion of Idahoans, more than half, feel that the current standard was fair. There's a group that actually strongly disagrees with us on the ballot initiative process called Secure Idaho, who actually did a poll that they released from January. and they found that 58% of Idahoans liked the current process. And then there was another chunk after that actually felt that it was too hard. It was only a small number of people that felt that it was currently too easy. And that's a poll by a group that the pollster was Brandon Durst at Secure Idaho. They had a series of recommendations about how we can limit the ballot initiative process. And even they, when they did their poll, found that the majority of Idahoans supported the current standards.
Don't see any other questions. Thank you for being in committee. Dr. Jean Henshield, Mary Ruck will follow her. And then Tina Hilding will be virtually. There's your page right there, ma'am. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself and who you represent.
Chair Guthrie, members of the committee, my name is Dr. Jean Henscheid. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Idaho. I'm here to register the League's opposition to SJR 101. The mission of our organization is to facilitate public participation in government decision-making. Any attempt to abridge self-governance is seen by League members as an infringement on the fundamental rights of citizens. On its face, this resolution's requirement that 6% of all voters in every district assent to placing an issue on the ballot seems innocuous enough. The truth, requiring signatures from every corner of a rural state, renders the initiative process nearly impossible. It does not increase representation in signatures. It is a tactic taken from a national playbook written by big money special interests to block policies popular with citizens that partisans don't like. As the Idaho Supreme Court noted in its rejection of this exact ploy 4 years ago, taking aim at the initiative process happens after an initiative succeeds. If citizens speak and those who purport to represent them don't like what they say, voters are silenced. It is ironic that sponsors of the bill commend voters to use their signatures in the ballot box to change their government, and in nearly the same breath remove the voters' rights to engage in the same way through initiatives. As has been the case throughout this and recent legislative sessions, this bill has the earmarks of a growing national effort by big money special interests to diminish grassroots democracy. This is not the Idaho way. This is the Arizona, North Dakota, Michigan, Ohio, Oklahoma, Florida, Montana, Arkansas way. It is unoriginal in the damage it causes to our system of government. Please do not send this bill to the floor.
Thank you.
I stand for questions.
Senator Shippey, are you getting ready to pull the trigger? Yes. Senator Shippey. I thought so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm probably not going to say your name right.
Henscheid.
Henscheid.
No L in there.
Thank you. My question is, does your organization, you are testifying in opposition, does your organization believe that this question should not be put to the voters and the voters make the final decision on this?
Dr. Henscheid.
Senator Guthrie, Chair Guthrie, Senator Shippey, this abridgment of citizens' rights and the will of the people should not be abridged. This is in no way a topic that deserves any conversation. This is a tradition in Idaho that spans more than a century. And the League of Women Voters believe that it is not an issue worth bringing up to anyone, the legislature, the voters, and we would strongly oppose any effort to do this kind of thing to our Constitution.
Senator Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Henscheid, Dr. Henscheid. I am trying to understand because I think we agree that the voters should be able to weigh in on things like this, on constitutional amendments. So I'm just trying to understand why we're concerned that we want them to weigh in on initiatives, but we aren't comfortable with them weighing in on a constitutional amendment about initiatives.
Dr. Henscheid.
A little history about the League of Women Voters. The litmus test we use for determining whether or not a constitutional amendment should be considered is if the issue is grievous and an immediate danger to the citizens of either the state or the U.S. This is not a dangerous issue. This is not in need of immediate address. Changing the Constitution should be about very, very serious issues. Absolutely no one has said that we are in danger because of the initiative process.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you for being in committee, and while I mispronounced your name to start with, I promise you it won't be the last one I get wrong, but
All right.
thank you for
Senator
being
Guthrie.
here. Mary Ruck.
Good morning, Chair and committee members.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. My name is Mary Ruck. I live here in the Treasure Valley, and I am testifying in opposition to SJR 101. I am so very disappointed that I am standing in front of you yet to talk about another legislative issue against. Let me start again. Sorry. I am so very disappointed that I am standing in front of yet another legislative committee speaking out against another anti-referenda and initiatives proposal, despite the Idaho Supreme Court calling the 2021 legislative attempt to change the Idaho Constitution edicts regarding ballot initiatives tyranny by the minority. Here we go again. I want to know what on earth is so frightening when it comes to Idahoans expressing their opinions about a select number of issues that might impact us, we Idaho residents and citizens. There have been so very few initiatives brought to the Idaho voters. 15. It's minuscule. Citizens of Idaho occasionally want to voice their collective opinion about a few issues on a ballot. That is okay. We want to share the decision-making space with you. Perhaps the relentless assault on our right to pose a question to all Idaho citizens should stop. As you know, the current process to qualify a ballot initiative is rigorous, it is almost onerous, and it requires an enormous amount of time and dedication, almost exclusively provided by volunteers. I have been a volunteer for a couple of the initiatives in the 9 years I have lived in Idaho. It is a work of the dedicated and the committed. Let Idahoans who are so motivated to be an active part of lawmaking go about the business of exercising their civic responsibility as the Constitution describes. I challenge the idea, if indeed there is a lot of outside money coming into this, and that is wrong, perhaps approach that issue in other ways for all of the issues that this body considers, because this isn't alone.
If you could wrap up.
Please vote no on this initiative.
Thank you for being in committee.
Thank you.
We're going to see if our technology works and go to Tina Hilding. Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Introduce yourself for the record, who you represent. You'll have 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie and members of the committee. My name is Tina Hilding, and I'm from Moscow. I'd like to express my opposition to SJR 101. I believe SJR 101 would silence Idaho voters rather than giving them a voice. The initiative process and referendums allow voters to act on issues that really matter to them. They have to matter because from personal experience, I can tell you it is tons of work to get enough signatures to get something on the ballot. I have worked as a volunteer on 3 separate initiatives. For each of them, I walked or stood for hours collecting signatures from strangers, sometimes in the freezing cold. Actually, it seems like it was always cold or raining. We were not paid. When I collected signatures, I heard the people's voices of Idaho on those pages. There were many friendly conversations, including with people who didn't sign. Each time I told people about our efforts and that their signature would help to get the initiative on the ballot. If it did, every voter in the state would then have a chance to decide and vote on it. which is what happened on 2 of the 3 initiatives that I worked on. In 2018, the Medicaid Expansion Initiative won by more than 60%, including in nearly every rural county in Idaho. The people from every part of Idaho spoke on what they wanted. This year, once again, I worked hard to collect signatures, and then our initiative failed. The initiative process worked again and truly allowed every voter in the state to have a voice. With SJR 101 asking every district in the state to get sufficient signatures to get a measure on the ballot would mean that one district, a tiny minority, would stop the voice of voters in every other district. It would make it impossible to get an initiative on the ballot. That right is enshrined in our state constitution and should stay there. It's important to Idaho voters. Like our other rights, like our right to free speech or religion, these are not questions that should be put to voters. I hope you consider voting against SJR 101. Thank you for consideration. I'm happy to answer questions.
Senator Burnt does have a question.
Not a question, Mr. Chairman, just a comment. Ms. Hilding, I remember you testifying in the past in debate in such serious and heavy matters. It's nice to see a smile. Thank you for your attitude this morning.
And I can tell you that you're always walking in the rain comment got a chuckle in the room, so.
Well, I don't like being cold, and I can tell you, I've been very cold doing that job.
Thank you for being here. We're going to go to Nicholas Miller virtually as well. And after that, we'll try Melanie Edwards virtually. Maybe not. Let's try Melanie Edwards. Ms. Edwards, can you hear us? You're muted on your end.
Am I good?
You're good now. Introduce yourself for the record, and you have 2 minutes. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Guthrie and committee members. My name is Dr. Melanie Edwards. I live in Idaho Falls, and I've worked for 16 years as a physical therapist in this community. I represent myself, and I oppose SJR 101. I value the ability to have a voice in Idaho on issues that I am passionate about. This means through grassroots groups of individuals that care about the same issues that I care about. These are issues like healthcare, because in my work, I've helped everyday Idahoans when they are suffering from accidents and severe illnesses. It was important to me, therefore, that we were able to advocate for Medicaid expansion and get it on the ballot. And we had a lot of snow here in Idaho Falls too, as well as the rain and the cold. I want to emphasize this was hard work across the state, but it was then passed in a landslide across the state. If the proposed amendment had been in place, we would not have been able to get it on the ballot. Many thousands of uninsured Idahoans would have gone without access to health care, and that seriously pains me. The Idaho Constitution foresaw that there would be situations where the citizens of Idaho needed to be able to petition their legislature for grievances and have a chance of getting such an important issue on the ballot. It should not be possible for one district to have veto power against putting an initiative on the ballot that is important enough to reach the threshold in all the other districts. This is what would be the effect, possibly an unintended one, of this constitutional amendment. This is not a reform of the process, but abolishes it for grassroots groups and makes it only possible for big money special interests, which I know we're all concerned about. Therefore, please vote no on SJR 101. Thank you for the opportunity to testify from Idaho Falls, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any questions, but thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Brian Amberg.
Time expired. Good, right, I'm done.
Is Brian Amberg in?
Good.
Let's see. He says he's in person, but let's go to Audrey Numbers?
There are lots of people who say.
Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie, committee members. I'm Audrey Numbers, a citizen of Idaho since 1984. Thank you for listening to my testimony. I'm here to oppose SJR 101. This bill is designed purposely to effectively eliminate the right of Idaho citizens to have a voice when their legislature won't listen to them. This right is vital. An example is in the past, the vast majority of Idahoans wanted Medicaid expansion. Our governor had 3 committees that recommended it, yet the legislature would not do it. It became clear when over 60% of voters approved it via the initiative process that that is what Idahoans wanted. And even more Idahoans support it today. Yet continuing, our legislators attack it yearly. This bill would make it impossible for Idahoan citizens to ever have the opportunity to have such a voice in the future. I urge you to vote no on this bill. Protect our citizen democracy that is the core, that gives a voice to the people that this legislature is here to represent. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee this morning. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Cynthia Gibson. And after that, we'll try Nicholas Miller again virtually. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Gibson. I'm with the Idaho Conservation League. Since 1973, the Idaho Conservation League has worked to protect the air you breathe, the water you drink, the lands and wildlife that you love. On behalf of the Idaho Conservation League and our 30,000 members and supporters, we respectfully ask that you oppose Senate Joint Resolution 101 and instead hold the bill in committee. Idahoans love their lands, water, wildlife, and the initiative process that has been used to advance common sense measures that protect those values. Unfortunately, some issues have divided the legislature. Initiatives provide a critical pressure relief valve when Idahoans want what the legislature won't pass. It provides a process for the people. The right has been enfranchised in our Constitution since statehood, and it is the people's right. According to the state of Idaho's Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, all political power is inherent in the people. The fact is that since 1912, only 15 initiatives have been successful. That's an average of only 1 every 7 years. Idahoans have been judicious with initiatives, and it remains an important part of our democratic framework. We respectfully ask that you hold this bill in committee, and I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee. I don't see any questions, but appreciate you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Let's try Nicholas Miller again.
Okay,
Are you with us?
I am here. Can you hear me, please?
We can. Just introduce yourself for the record.
My apologies. We were having audio connections. My name is Nicholas Miller. I'm a retired lawyer living in Haley, Idaho. I've been an Idaho Citizen registered voter for 10 years. I'm also have an extensive military record. I have the Silver Star. I have the Purple Heart. I have the Navy Combat Commendation Medal with Combat V. I have the Vietnamese Silver Star, and I have the Navy Unit Commendation and the Presidential Unit Commendation. I went to war to fight for democracy. Idaho is a wonderful place with a wonderful democracy, but it is trending in a direction of giving dictatorship to the minority rather than the will of the majority. This particular proposed constitutional provision would strengthen the ability of a very small minority in the state to restrict the will or the opportunity for the majority of people in Idaho to express their will as to what is necessary to reform the governmental processes in the state. So I speak against and strongly oppose this amendment. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much for being with us. Glad we connected. Don't see any questions. Thank you. Let's try Jay Olmanson. Also virtually. I'm trying to skip around a little bit because the virtual people are usually from out of the area, and we're going to try our best to get to everyone. I don't know if we will, but we'll get just as deep as we can. Trying to give some parity throughout the state, and the virtual aspect allows us to kind of get a more of a statewide feel. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Turn your volume up a little bit or get closer to your mic, but we can hear you. Go ahead, just introduce yourself.
Is this better? My name is
Yes.
Jay Olmanson. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Jay Olmanson. I live in District 1, Coquilala, Idaho, and I am totally in opposition of SJR 101. It, as has been said, it restricts the ability of the citizens of Idaho to express themselves. It will make it almost impossible to pass another initiative. And we can't do that. The legislature seems to be bent on denying the citizens' ability to express themselves and have their voices heard. That's all I have. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Appreciate it. Let's see if Eloisa Harper, are you in committee this morning? Indicated she is. Let's try Robert Elliott virtually. After that, if Bonnie Schuster's in committee, we'll go to her next, after this one. Mr. Elliott, can you hear us? I think you're muted on your end. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you'll have 2 minutes. Welcome to committee.
Hi, my name is Robert Elliott. I'm a resident of Boise, Idaho, and I am calling to let you know that I oppose SJR 101, and I would urge you to do the same. Idaho is not California. We already have a pretty high bar for getting ballot initiatives, through the process. I believe we've only had 15 in the entire history that we've had the ballot initiative process. So I don't see the same issue that we see in California, where there are ballot initiatives just flooding the voters every single year. The bar is really high. We saw, with the Medicaid and Medicare expansion, it was successful with the ranked choice voting. The people were able to, voice their opposition during the general election. So I don't see what problem this constitutional amendment is trying to solve. And as to the big money infecting our politics, I don't see how this would make it any better. I see it as making that problem far worse, because with the proposed changes, a single large donor could overwhelm one district and shut out the voice of the rest of the entire state. So it gives veto power to one district. So I don't see how this really makes it any more difficult for big money to influence. I see this as making it much easier for big money to influence and shut down any ballot initiative process. That's all I have to say, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you for being in committee. Bonnie Schuster? Welcome to committee. You'll have to pull that mic down.
I will. All right. Thank you. Chairman Guthrie and committee. My name is Bonnie Schuster. I live in Boise and I represent myself. I oppose SJR 101. I've been in this building a lot lately and I've heard quite a few statements from legislators expressing pride about Idaho's protections of our citizens' rights and freedoms. But apparently those protections don't extend to our rights of initiative and referendum. This proposal would ask Idaho voters to effectively eliminate their rights of initiative and referendum by instituting a 35 district requirement, but cloaks its purpose in a fairness argument. The Idaho Supreme Court in the 2021 decision thoroughly discussed the impact of the 35 legislative districts requirement. As stated by the court, quote, if the goal is to prevent any initiative or referendum from qualifying for the ballot, then this is probably an effective tactic. The statement of purpose says it will address the practice of venue shopping. The Supreme Court noted that if the 35 district requirement were in effect, a, quote, paid special interest lobby could derail a popular initiative it dislikes by focusing its opposition efforts on a single legislative district. That indeed is a real threat of venue shopping, and it would be created by passage of this amendment. There is no reason to put this on the ballot except to try to get Idaho voters to give away their rights and concentrate more power in the hands of this body. You don't ask us to vote away our right to bear arms or our religious liberty. Why just this right? Idahoans are busy working to support their families, care for their children, volunteer in their communities, and occasionally enjoy a little leisure. Why do we have to keep coming back year after year, sometimes several times a year, to defend our constitutional rights of initiative and referendum? Enough is enough. Stop it right here, right now in this committee. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Susan Weaver will try her virtually.
Good morning. Oh, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record, who you represent and where you're from. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony. My name is Susan Weaver, and I'm a resident of Latah County, Idaho, in Moscow. I ask that you oppose SJR 101. It is a clear attempt to shut down Idaho Citizens Initiative rights. It's already really difficult to gather the amount of signatures needed to get on an initiative in Idaho. I worked on an initiative and it was a lot. I was cold as well. Passing this amendment would be a blatant act by legislators to silence Idaho voters. The people of Idaho have a right to their opinions being heard. It is your job as representatives to protect our rights and to work on our behalf. SJR 101 would give any one district the power to block an initiative, as many others have said. Our urban district, or one urban district, could block the initiative that is supported by the majority of voters in Idaho. Our initiative process has existed for over 100 years, and you would essentially be shutting that down. All of us who are homeowners benefit from the homeowners property tax exemption, which was passed through an initiative, the sunshine law that requires campaigns to be transparent about where their funding is coming from was also passed through a ballot initiative. Please don't take away this right of Idahoans, and I ask that you just vote no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Don't see any questions. Thank you. Margie Bass. Welcome to committee. Just introduce yourself and you'll have a couple minutes.
Thank you, Senator Guthrie. Thank you, committee, for allowing me this time. Excuse me. My name is Margie Bass. Well, that didn't work. And I have lived in Idaho for over 40 years. I currently live in Garden City, and I am asking you to vote no on SJR 101. Our Idaho citizenry can have their voices heard in a couple of ways. One is by voting. The second is by the citizen initiative process. I have helped on a few initiatives, and it is not an easy process as you have heard. As citizens, we believe strongly enough in an issue to commit our time to go door to door and talk with other citizens. There may be other choices we could make to utilize this time, such as playing with our grandchildren, going for coffee with friends, church activities, or relaxing. But this is important enough to us that we feel that we need to bring an issue before the voters of Idaho. We grab our clipboard and we start walking and knocking the doors and discussing the topics with people. People learn from us, we learn from them. This is an educational process. I am unclear as to why this right, which is guaranteed in our state constitution, is constantly under attack each legislative session. Why stifle the voice of the citizens you are elected to represent? The current initiative process is such a difficult task that we have only seen a few initiatives actually reach the goal and get on the ballot. Once it is on the ballot, the entire state has their voice. Let's get it to the ballot and let the voices of the citizens be heard. I feel it is your job as our elected officials to protect our rights and freedoms. Asking the citizens of our state to vote on taking away one of our rights is wrong. Please vote no on SJR 101.
Thank you for being in committee.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Let's see, Stephen Key. That's probably another one in the got it not quite right category. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Chairman Guthrie, members of the committee, my name is Stephen Kui. I get mispronunciations all the time.
I got both of them wrong.
I am here representing myself, and I'm here to oppose SJR 101. As we consider changing our state's constitution, I think it's worth thinking about when the ballot initiative process was first proposed. It was first proposed by Thomas Jefferson in 1775, before our country was even created. He proposed it for Virginia's state constitution. The ballot referendum was first utilized by Massachusetts in 1778, and then our very own Union required it for any state to join the Union in 1857. As we consider changing and amending this very constitution of our own state of Idaho, I wonder why with this amendment. It reminds me of in the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin he's leaving it, and a woman asks him, "So what do we have, a republic or a monarchy?" And he looks to her and he says, "A republic, if you can keep it." And with this bill, I wonder, are we working to keep this republic, or are we going in the other direction? I think it's very clear which way this bill goes. I'd ask that you consider that and vote no against this. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee. I don't see any questions. Appreciate it. Let's try Ellen Smith. No? Did Brian Omberg ever show up? Let's try Heather Stout virtually.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, we can't see you, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Here we go. I think I did start the video. Thank you, Chairman Guthrie and committee members. And also, thank you, Chairman, so much for taking remote testimony. My name is Heather Stout, and I represent myself. I strongly urge you to vote no on SJR 101, a constitutional amendment requiring signatures from 6% of voters in all 35 of Idaho legislative districts is prohibitive, and it's totally unnecessary. In 2021, the Idaho Supreme Court struck down this idea. The court actually called it a form of tyranny. Why didn't this settle the issue once and for all? This current resolution would effectively give voters in one district the ability to block any initiative. Well, that sounds like the definition of tyranny to me. The citizen initiative process is a form of direct democracy. It exists to empower citizens, not negate them. The citizens of Idaho vote for legislators as part of our representative democracy, but in Idaho, we also have the ability to practice direct democracy through citizen initiatives. It offers our citizenry a direct way to voice our concerns and shape public policy. It is the very essence of being an American. Why would we mess with that? And as a rural voter, this resolution has the ability to completely silence my voice. The people of Idaho are very proud of our freedoms. The Idaho Supreme Court, found that, quote, the rights of the initiative and referendum are fundamental rights, unquote. This resolution violates our fundamental constitutional rights. We do not need to change our Constitution. Instead, we do need to continue to protect and empower our citizenry. Do not take away our rights. Please vote no on SJR 101. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Don't see any questions. Let's try Kenneth Burchell. Virtually. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Turn your mic up a little bit. It's really faint.
I'll get a little closer to the computer.
Yeah, do everything you can. It's still a little bit hard to hear, but welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record and where you're from.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kenneth Burchell. I have lived in Idaho since 1960, believe it or not. I am a resident of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The SJR 101 is a solution in search of a problem. Outside money is given as the need for this bill, but this bill does nothing to prevent outside money. In fact, it arguably increases the need for it due to the higher restrictions on signature gathering. The Supreme Court of the state of Idaho has ruled that the right of initiative is an important and fundamental right for Idaho citizens, not U.S. citizens, and not under the U.S. Constitution, under the Idaho Constitution. The combination of a rigid timeline and severe distribution requirements kills the referendum process for all Idahoans. Under the current constitutional provision, the legislature can amend or even strike down an initiative result. So I fail to see any problem that is solved by this initiative. SJR 101 does nothing to block state money. In fact, it arguably increases the need for the same. And I ask you to not advance this bill to the floor. And I thank you again for the time to speak to you all today.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Don't see any questions. Thank you. Deborah Wimple. Welcome to committee. You'll probably have to pull that mic down.
There we go. Chairman Guthrie, members of the committee, I'm Deborah Whipple, born in Boise. I've lived here almost my entire life. Please vote against SJR 101. Educated in the Boise schools, I learned the importance of personal freedom and responsibility, and I learned that the government is our government. It is not tyrannical. It answers to us. I learned that was what made our country better than Russia or China or any dictatorship. I was taught to be a proud resident of one of the greatest democracies. My civics education didn't end in the classroom. My aunt made sure that all the Whipple children knew that we were descendants of William Whipple, who signed the Declaration of Independence. She told us that each of us has a personal duty to stand up for democracy. Perhaps that's in part why I became a lawyer.
A vital component of our democracy is the power of the citizen initiative, guaranteed to us by our state constitution. SJR 101 seeks to amend the Constitution so as to eliminate that right. In 2021, our state Supreme Court struck down the statute, which would have created the same requirements SJR 101 attempts to create by amendment. In its opinion, the court referred to the signature requirement of 6% of all the voters of each district as an actual tyranny of the minority that squarely conflicts with the democratic ideals that form the bedrock of the constitutional republic created by the Idaho Constitution. I'm asking you to not forward SJR 101 to the floor. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for your service.
Thank you for being in committee this morning. Let's try Deb. Don't see any questions. We'll try Deb Faraday virtually. Maybe we need to cue some Jeopardy music while we're waiting for these to spool up. That might help. Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, introduce yourself for the record, where you're from and who you represent. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Deb Faraday. I'm representing myself. I live in McCall, Idaho. I've lived in Idaho all my life. My grandchildren are sixth generation in Valley County. And in a state like Idaho, it's really important to have this initiative process. It's already extremely difficult, as I've watched a lot of those volunteers who have been around the state doing their work. We've only had 15 ballot initiatives placed on the ballot in Idaho. And I do feel that this bill would silence the voices of Idahoans. It would restrict the will of the people. The legislators that we elect to office who represent all, really, I hope you will listen to all. I hope you will listen to all those voices that have spoken today. There just is really no reason to put this bill on the ballot. Please don't take away the right of Idahoans. Thank you so much for listening to me today from McCall, Idaho. I request that you vote no on this bill.
Thank you. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Try Vicky Fadness.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record, where you're from, and you have a couple minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and committee members. I am Vicky Fadness. I live in Lewiston, Idaho, District 7. I am representing myself and I oppose SJR 101. Whoops, just a second. Well, I guess you don't need my picture. In reading this bill, I felt that it was written for one purpose. It was making it impossible to qualify initiatives and referendums for the ballot. In my book, it is clearly sending a message to citizens in Idaho from legislators that we don't care about what you want. We're going to make it impossible for citizen-led initiatives and referendums to pass. 101 requires all 35 districts to meet distribution requirements instead of 18. As a person who worked on the last initiative, it was not an easy task. We froze our toes and melted in the heat. This bill would require all 35 districts to meet requirements, and if one doesn't, then it silences the rest of the districts. So I'm asking that you protect the initiative process and the citizens' right to be actively involved and engaged in a fundamental democratic action guaranteed by the Constitution. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Don't see any questions, but thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Braun Roberts. Welcome to committee. Just introduce yourself and the time's yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members. I'm Braun Roberts and I live in Boise, Idaho. I've lived in Idaho over half my life, over 40 years. I appreciate having the opportunity to stand in front of you today, being allowed 2 minutes of your time, not being silenced. Ironically, I am speaking on SJR 101, which, if passed, will silence the voters of Idaho. If SJR 101 passes, this would be an attack on the initiative process, which is one important avenue for the voices of voters of Idaho. Currently, Idaho has one of the most difficult requirements for getting an initiative on the ballot. Why is it necessary to substantially increase the hurdles to the initiative process? Is it to silence the voters of Idaho? Very few initiatives have made it to the ballot in recent years. I am not willing to give away my right of the initiative process currently protected by the Idaho State Constitution, just like I would not give up my right to freedom of expression, freedom of religion, or freedom to bear arms. Please protect the voices of Idaho voters by defeating SJR 101. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Lisa Lazon Winningham. Just about guarantee I got that one wrong. Welcome to committee, though.
Thank you. It's lease on, like a new lease on life.
Oh.
And thank you, Chairman Guthrie and committee members for taking the time to hear my testimony. My name is Lisa Whittingham. I live in Kuna, which is in District 23. I'm sure you all know that. I had to plow my to get out here. So I was a little bit late. Anyway, I'm also a student at Boise State University, and I'm here representing myself as an Idahoan citizen, and I'm against SJR 101. When I moved here in 2021, I was happy to hear and learn about how serious Idahoans took their civic rights. The communities that I have been a part of in this state care about each other and want all neighbors to be treated fairly. The initiative process is one of the ways citizens can bring important concerns to the forefront and work together to make needed changes. In 2021, a similar proposal was brought forward to the legislature at the time, and an Idaho Supreme Court found that the proposed law was unconstitutional and would negate the citizens' ability to call for action for the government. Their opinion was that it was a form of tyranny that would allow one district to block any action brought by another district to the initiative process. It is disheartening and upsetting that after being told by a state Supreme Court that it was unconstitutional and tyrannical, that the next step of this legislature was to try to change the actual Constitution to allow tyranny. Today's political climate is challenging. The job you were elected to do by the people of the state was not to take away our voice, but to act on behalf of our voice. I hope you understand this and urge you to vote no on SJR 101. This change will disenfranchise your rural districts, give more power to out-of-state interests and deep pockets, and is asking citizens to vote against their own fundamental rights. Also, this wasn't in here, but the issue of special interests, why are you not bringing that to right? Like, that's the problem. So make a law about that, not about our ability to speak. Thank you for your time, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you for being in committee. Christine Moon says she's in person, but she's also from Sandpoint. Is that you coming up, Christine? No? Okay, let's go with John Bankston. Welcome to committee. Just introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, my name is John Bankston. I'm from Boise, and I thank you for the chance to speak today on my own behalf. I want to start by considering the purpose of the legislation before you today. SJR 101 seeks to ensure that all regions of our state get a voice in the initiative process. I, for one, think, why stop there? Why don't we say that every neighborhood, every zip code has an opinion on the proposed initiative? Hell, let's have every single voter get their voice heard on an initiative. Of course, this is already the process. Every time an initiative makes it to the ballot, each legislative district is thoroughly consulted. Their constituents are given ample time to consider the legislation, and on election day, they're asked to cast their vote up or down. As others have shared, the process to get an initiative on the ballot is already arduous. In the 113 years since the process was written into the state constitution, only 35 initiatives have even made it to the ballot. By comparison, members of the Idaho House and Senate introduced 31 bills yesterday alone. If this proposal were to come to pass, Idaho would be the only state in the nation to require unanimous support from state legislative districts to put an initiative on the ballot. Singular districts would hold veto power over an overwhelming majority of the state, and citizens would be stripped of a crucial democratic right. I do want to bring in a little bit of historical context. There is some mention of what the requirements were historically, and I want to call attention to the fact that Senate Bill 1108 in 2013 was the first measure that required 18 districts to provide support for an initiative. I, for one, was not traveling by horse and buggy at the time. To paraphrase from the Supreme Court, such a decision would be tyranny of the minority, and I urge you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Try to go to Thad Butterworth. Are you with us? Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record. Who you represent?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Thad Butterworth, and I am the Ada County Republican Party chairman. So I am here representing the Ada County Republicans. In our winter session, we actually passed a resolution requesting that this body address the initiative process because we are seeing concerns with it. That was passed by a majority of the voters that are closest to the people, your precinct committeemen and your state central committee. One of the things that we've noticed is that the focus has been largely on gathering signatures in populated counties. And we have observed from states like Oregon that the initiative process has been used to silence the voice of the rural counties. So we really are concerned about where that can go. We're also concerned about the amount of out-of-state money that comes in.
Now you can see who is behind
on this initiative process will actually just help to bring a higher quality to our state and preserve the integrity of our
very, very
liberty.
hard. In fact, impossible. You might as
And
well
finally,
do away with a
this
citizen's
is not
initiative.
saying that the Senate and the House are going to create this by themselves. We're actually putting this before the people and saying, would you vote to require a higher threshold? That seems to me to be almost in line with what the initiative process is here. We're bringing it before the people and saying, do you see a problem here and would you like to address this? So in that frame, I'd like to encourage you to pass SJR 101 onto the floor of the Senate and vote on it from there. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Senator Ruckty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Butterworth, do you have any data to support your concern that rural districts are not able to participate or are not participating in the initiative process?
Mr. Butterworth.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ritchie, I do not have any data with me. That was argued and debated fairly extensively within the Resolutions Committee when we did work on that. So,
Don't see any other questions. Thank you for being in committee.
thank you.
Georgia Early. We'll try her virtually.
Start my video.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Introduce yourself and where you're from. You have a couple minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Senator Guthrie, and members of the committee for hearing my concerns. My name is Georgia Early. I've lived in Boundary County for District 2 for 45 years, and I oppose SJR 101. It's extremely hard to get signatures for an issue to get on the ballot as it is. And this bill essentially will make it impossible. And initiatives give all citizens an equal chance to vote on issues. Doesn't matter if it's rural or wherever it is. It presents no discriminations against any county or individual. None whatsoever. Every citizen has an equal vote, and voting is a peaceful way for citizens to use their voice. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed in a democratic republic. And we have a democratic republic. Our legislature is supposed to represent us, the voters. And that can only happen when leaders listen to the voice of the people. Our vote is an issue, on any issue. That is our voice. Our vote is among the greatest freedoms of speech that we have. I have grandchildren in Idaho, and I want them to have the same opportunities to use their voice as I've had. So to inhibit the initiative process or to effectively shut it down, as this bill will do, that's shutting down the voice of the people. And in the 45 years that I've lived in Idaho, I've never seen our legislatures try to do that until the past 15 years. That's what authoritarian governments do, not a democratic republic. So I urge you to vote no on SJR 101. And I thank you so much for listening to my concerns.
Thank you for joining us. I don't see any questions. Let's see. Let's go with Brenda Weeks. Maybe not. Let's try Molly Marsh. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Guthrie and committee.
Introduce yourself for the record and where you're from.
Yes, I am Molly Marsh, and I am from Mountain Home. I reside in District 8. I'm representing myself, and I am totally against SJR 101. SJR 101 will eliminate the rights of Idahoans through the impossible to achieve requirements set forth in the bill. President Lincoln said that the United States is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. SJR 101 proposes Idahoans vote to eliminate our very own rights to self-government. Since when is it fine for Idahoans to be controlled by the puppet string, of out-of-state interests and money? Vote against SJR 101. Idaho democracy depends on the voices of Idahoans. Please vote against SJR 101. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Let's try Catherine Larson. Technology can be frustrating, but it does give us a chance to hear from those across the state. More so than when we didn't have it, so. Let's see, while we're not able to do that, did Brian Amberg or Louisa Harper or Ellen Smith ever show up in committee? They're all showing that they were intending to do in person, but let's try Ellen Spencer virtually then. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Introduce yourself for the record and where you're from. Welcome to committee.
Yes, my name is Ellen Spencer. I live in Eagle, Idaho, and I am speaking to you to oppose SJR 101. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for having me. I've listened to people this morning, and everyone has said pretty much everything I was going to say. But one thing I see as a little bit of a confusion is that this proposal is asking the subject matter to be put to the voters. It is a constitutional amendment. It's not a bill. I think this is disingenuous, and because what we're asking is for the voters to vote against their best interests. You've heard all the arguments of why. Tyranny of the minority. Now, I know that Mr. Butterworth and Mr. McConnich spoke to big money, and that is an issue. That's an issue on both sides of the aisle. And if that's an issue, then I think that's the matter that should be addressed. This proposal is, it's contrary to what the people want. You are asking them to take their rights away, and as other people have stated, you wouldn't ask them for free speech or for freedom of religion or gun rights. Mr. McConnich said that he didn't believe that this was a fundamental right as decided by the Supreme Court, and maybe not in the U.S. Constitution as it stands, but in the Idaho Constitution, it was determined it is a fundamental right of Idaho citizens. Therefore, based on all previous arguments and discussion from other people who are far more eloquent than I am, I ask you to hold this proposal in committee and do not let it pass. This is against the best interests of all Idaho citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I don't see any questions. We'll try to go to Jessica Salzider. Good morning. You're muted, I believe. Now you're seeing. It's not wanting to unmute you. That's odd. We can try to come back to you in a minute, see if you can fix something there. Let's go to Brandon, Saul Chesson.
Hello?
Good morning. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but you're welcome to go ahead. Just introduce yourself for the record, where you're from.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Saul Chesson. I live in Boise, Idaho. I've lived in Idaho since the 80s. So many before already have very eloquently expressed, many of the legitimate concerns about this bill. I also am opposed to it for all of those reasons. I guess one thing I would ask people to consider is if we were to apply such a rule to something else like getting elected officials on the ballot, for example, we would never get anybody on the ballot because we never have a unanimous populace. We have different views and different values, and we feel differently about, certain issues. But in spite of that, the majority gets to decide, what rules we're going to live under. And this effectively requires the decision on an initiative to be unanimous. And that will just never happen. I mean, that doesn't happen on any issue. So I would just ask you to strongly consider opposing this SJR 101. That's all I had to say. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Appreciate you joining us. Going to go to Brandon Durst.
Good morning, Chairman Guthrie.
Morning. Just introduce yourself for the record, who you represent, and time's yours.
Chairman Guthrie,
Speak up if you can, too.
You bet. My name is Brandon Durst. For the record, I'm representing myself in Polk, Idaho.
Really having a hard time hearing you, Brandon.
Okay. Let me get the mic right up in my mouth. How about that? Is that better?
A little, not much.
Okay. While I'm working on that, let me just kind of start my presentation here. I've heard reference to the poll that we conducted on behalf of Secure Idaho, and I want to make sure that we correct the record on that issue.
Just really not able to discern what you're saying. Can you do any better with your mic? Can we come?
The mic here.
If you think you can fix anything, we'll come back to you in a minute. Is there anyone in the room that signed up that hasn't testified yet? Oh, so okay, we got a few.
Oh, I see what happened.
Are you there now?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
that. Can you hear me now, Chairman Guthrie?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was on the wrong microphone input. Again, for the record, my name is Brandon Durst. I am representing myself and also Polk, Idaho, a statewide Idaho polling firm that conducts scientific research on behalf of organizations. A poll was commissioned by Secure Idaho, and I conducted a statewide poll. And we asked a specific question with relationship to a minimum number of signatures. And so let me read the exact quotation from the poll and the results that we received. The question was, how much do you support or oppose requiring a minimum number of signatures to be gathered in all legislative districts to get an initiative on the ballot? And then we asked on a scale from 1 to 5, from strong support to strong oppose. Our results indicated that with 440 responses, which is a margin of error of 4.67%, that a net of 54% of Idahoans, likely voters, supported making a minimum number of signatures required. In contrast, only 23.6% of Idaho voters opposed that concept. And so, and I can tell you, because we did polling on a lot of questions on this issue, I can tell you that the poll actually skewed a little bit to the left compared to where the Idaho electorate is. And so to suggest, and I heard that there was testimony earlier that said that people were satisfied. They weren't satisfied, especially when we got into the details. And I believe that the Senator Okonowitz resolution here is well in keeping with the desires of Idaho voters, and I would encourage your support.
Thank you. Senator Ruckey has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Durst, did you ask the polling question, would you be in favor of increasing the number of legislative districts that would be required to have 6% signatures from 18 to 35?
Mr. Durst?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ruckey, the question, as I stated, asked if they would support requiring a minimum number of signatures to be gathered in all legislative districts. And so that is to assume that a respondent would discern that all legislative districts means all legislative districts, not just a set number as it is in the current statute.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, would you come up and just introduce yourself?
The polling that he mentioned, when
kind of exhausted
he
the
wrote
ones
it
that
so
signed
that
up
it
on the deal
favored
anyway, so just introduce yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee
bill.
members. My name
So-
is Dean Hagerman. I'm a voter from District 21,
Yeah, so
representing
he's-
myself. I want to give my, since what I'm saying has been said by so many other people, I want to give it some context. I served in the military for 39 years, and one of my responsibilities was to help establish a functional democracy in both Bosnia and Iraq. The initiatives process, through the initiative process, the Idaho Constitution provides a way for citizens to have their concerns addressed. Since the amendment was added 87 years ago, 35 initiatives have reached the ballot, only 15 have passed. Contrary to claims, the initiative process in Idaho has not been abused like it has been in other states. Unfortunately, when citizens succeed, the legislature has often made it harder for their voices to be heard. The 2018 election, has been mentioned before, is illustrative of this problem. After Idahoans voted to expand Medicaid, the legislature responded by changing the rules for citizen initiatives. In 2021, the Idaho Supreme Court struck down that effort, calling it a form of tyranny. Now, SJR 101 seeks to reverse that ruling by amending the Constitution. Propositions 1 and 2 from the 2018 ballot challenge the argument about the influence of outside money. Prop 1, which aimed to establish historic horse racing, failed, despite the significant amount of state support. Prop 2, which expanded Medicaid, passed with minimal outside money. This proposal would instead welcome big money into the process. Idahoans deserve to be heard, and legislators should not have the final say on issues that directly affect them. I respectfully ask that you vote against SJR 101. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Going to try Jessica again while we're doing that. The ones that raised their hand, maybe there's some seats up front so we can kind of go through quickly while we're seeing if we can get a hold of Jessica again. I think there was another 3 or 4. Getting tight on time, or I'm going to incur the wrath of the majority leader because we do have a floor session at 10:30, but I'll kind of take some guidance from her on how flexible she is with that. Come on up, whoever wants to be next. Introduce yourself for the record. Oh, wait a minute. We do have Jessica. Never mind. Sorry, sir. Can you hear us now, and can you talk now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Introduce yourself.
Fantastic. Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Salceder. I'm from Boise, Idaho. I represent myself, and I oppose SJR 101. I've been lucky enough to live in Idaho for over half my life. I've witnessed the values and priorities of Idahoans for over 20 years. And one of the things I've been the most proud of as an Idahoan is our ability to pass citizen-led ballot initiatives. To allow this to progress would limit this ability. I got to teach fifth grade for close to a decade, and part of fifth grade curriculum is teaching United States history. I was so proud to tell my students that in the U.S., the government is of the people, by the people, for the people, and that our voices matter, and that our representatives do listen to us and make rules and legislations with our best interest at heart. Please don't make it more difficult for us to be heard. I loved sharing with students that in the Idaho Constitution, it states in Article 1, Section 2, all political power is inherent in the people. Therefore, it's to further inhibit the ability of citizen-driven initiatives. It's unconstitutional. To allow SJ 101 to progress would be a violation of Article 1, Section 2, and further take away our inherent power. Many of us live in districts where our values and desires of how Idaho is governed are not being given credence. We're not heard. For example, I personally have respectfully reached out to the representatives and senator of my district time and time again, yet I have not once heard back electronically, verbally, or otherwise. Simply because I don't live in a district where the senator and representatives will have dialogue with me or consider my desires doesn't invalidate my beliefs and opinions. My voice matters. All Idahoans' voices matter. My students' voices matter. And when I am unheard, it is through the citizen-led ballot initiative that I feel like I can have a voice. We don't need more speed bumps. Again, I'm Jessica Salceder, Boise, Idaho, and I oppose SJR 101. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm glad you got back in. Earlier, when you kept getting remuted, your facial expressions provided some much-needed comic relief. So
I know. I show it all on my face.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, come on up now. Just introduce yourself. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jeff Faraday from Boise, Idaho. I was born here in Idaho and I've lived here most of my life. I oppose SJR 101. I'd like to focus on what the Idaho Supreme Court really told us in its opinion. It told us that the legislation that would raise the number of required 6% districts to 35 really was a repeal, in effect, a repeal of our initiative process. So what were they telling us? They were saying that was really a subterfuge. Oh, well, we're just, to use Mr. Butterworth's phrase, raising the quality of the process. No, you're making the process impossible. I ask you not to put that issue before the Idaho voters and ask them to say, are you okay with making this process, improving the quality of this process so that it becomes virtually impossible? Don't do that. I respectfully ask that you not do that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for coming up to testify. Yeah, just whoever wants to go next. I think there's 3 or 4 more. Welcome to committee. Do introduce yourself for the record.
Hello, my name is Ken Harris. I'm from Boise, Idaho. I represent myself and God bless you all and thank you all for your service. I moved here in 1960. My father was a Republican legislator in these halls for 10 years. I was also a tour guide in Boston. And during that time, I investigated the causes of the formation of our country. Our country was formed in April 1775. One of the underlying causes of this was tyranny of the few. I participated in the initiative process for the Medicaid expansion, and that was successful. I participated in more public school funds after that turned out to be effective and passed. I participated in open primaries that lost. This works. There is a representative in these halls who came up with the phrase, the uninformed electorate. There's proof of the pudding. If it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, well, maybe it is. If a initiative were to get to the ballot that was promulgating the legalization of marijuana, I would work to defeat it. Hey, I respect all of you for your service. God bless you all. And please vote no on this particular SJR 101. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for being.
I have one addition that I would like to offer to this body if needed. My services.
well done.
I stand for volunteering for making a recording.
Yeah, we needed that. Whoever's next.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie. I'm not entirely sure I checked the right box last night when I was signing up. It was really late, so.
That's okay. Just
anyway,
introduce
I
yourself
might just
for the
be
record.
bombing in on you here. Chairman Guthrie, members of the committee, I'm Georgia Boatman. I'm a native Idahoan and a retired teacher. I ask you to vote no on Senate Resolution 101. You know, the word represent is an interesting word. It means to act or speak officially for someone and defend their interests. That's your job. Sometimes, however, when this body does not speak for its constituents or defend the interests of the citizens, citizens need to be able to speak for themselves. That's what the Idaho Constitution has provided for in the initiative process. You've already heard, so I won't repeat, that the requirement of 35 legislative districts is such a high bar that it will essentially kill the initiative process. Maybe that's the unspoken point of the resolution. You've already heard that in over 90 years, only 15 initiative and referenda have made it on the books. Idaho is hardly awash in the ballot process. You've already heard that there's outside of the state money coming in. I would say a lot of it on both sides. You've already heard that this initiative process will ensure that only one district that fails to qualify will make the other 34 districts vote overridden. Even when an initiative makes it on the ballot, voters still can vote it up or down. Why would any representative of the people try to obstruct the voices of citizens unless they simply do not want to know what Idahoans really think and want? This does not sound like defending our interests or indeed representing the citizens of Idaho. Please vote no on SGR 101. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Appreciate your patience. Next. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm David Walsh. I'm from Boise. I'm represented by District 17, and I'm representing myself at this podium. I just want to let you guys know, and I'm not going to repeat all the talking points from previous folks, but I really appreciate you guys giving us the chance to let people hear us out. And in particular, I'm surprised that the legislature is once again moving the goalposts, changing the requirements of a fundamentally constitutional right that all Idahoans have. So I ask you, I implore you to kill this amendment, stop this change. Please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room? Come on up. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Gwen McElhenney. I'm a lifelong resident of Boise. I currently reside in District 17 with my husband, Robert McAndrew. Both of us are adamantly opposed to SJR 101. The ballot initiative is an important constitutional right that should be protected rather than weakened. It gives Idahoans the right to vote directly on issues they care about, and by making it harder to participate, it's making it harder for Idahoans to participate in the lawmaking process. For the people, by the people, of the people. From working to put 3 recent initiatives on the ballot as unpaid volunteers, my husband and I know that it's already difficult enough to follow existing initiative procedures. This new law would add such onerous restrictions to the process that it would render the provision for direct democracy null and void. Idahoans are the ones who should decide whether or not they want a particular proposal to appear on statewide referendum. All Idaho voters should then have the opportunity to determine their future by choosing to accept or reject the proposed legislation. This is what the writers of our state constitution intended. Please don't waste our hard-earned tax dollars in the courts defending this thinly disguised state of Idaho power grab. Please preserve democracy in Idaho. Vote no on SJR 101. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee. I thought I saw one more back there. Come on up, sir. Oh, two more maybe. You got cut off. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and esteemed senators. My name is Kay Hummel. I was born in Boise. I've lived here most of my life, and I'm representing myself. I also strongly oppose SJR 101. First thing I want to say is that this amendment to our Constitution would ask us to give away our fundamental rights. Why would you or I do that? It's baffling. This is not a mere speed bump to improve the process. It actually destroys initiatives. The bar is set too high that it would virtually destroy, not improve the initiative process. I want to tell you about my two favorite initiatives of the few that have actually been passed by the people of Idaho in the last 113 years. One was the creation in 1938 of the Idaho Fish and Game Commission. Before that, we had a politicized, self-indulgent, uneven process for regulating our fish and game. The people of Idaho saw this problem and they voted to fix it. My other favorite one is the Sunshine Law from the 1970s. This was a great improvement. There was a lot of dark money going in and no transparency in elections at all levels. This has greatly improved the political life of our state, and I think you would agree that none of us would go back. Ballot measures through the initiative process are very difficult to get on the ballot, as you know. Let's not ruin it with this ill-thought-out amendment. Please vote no and do not send this to the floor of the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any questions. Sir, come on up. We got you here.
Scott Barron, Legislative 7. I am for any process that increases thought and reason over passion and emotion. I am for a legislative process that requires debate, research, thought, discussion, and bouncing ideas. I think better decisions are made that way. Over time, I'm not a direct democracy person. I like the republic. I like the dual republic to which we have. I think thought and reason over time. Many times I've been asked if I would just sleep on something for a day to let something breathe so that I could maybe have a better thought and reason to my decisions. The difference between a direct democracy for me and the republic is we catch a bad guy, or a bad guy does something, we send out a posse of 25 people. 25 people catch him, apprehend him, then they vote 25-1, he's guilty. The person caught says he's not guilty. The difference with the republic is the person commits a crime, takes off, the posse's formed, 25 people capture him, they vote again, 25-1. This time the sheriff rides in and says, hold on, he has some inherent liberties. He has some inherent rights. He has due process. That's a difference between a republic and a democracy. I vote that you consider that. I guess I'm saying I'd be for this. I disagree with the initiative process per se, only because I want to preserve thought and reason, because sometimes we get into topics that are very difficult, and I like thought and reason to prevail. Thanks.
Thank you. Going to try to go with Elizabeth Fabrica virtually. I think I've got everybody in the room, so we got a couple, three more we're going to try virtually, and then we'll try to get wrapped up. You hear us, Elizabeth?
Sorry, I was frozen.
We can't see you. We can hear you, so you're welcome to go ahead. Just introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Fabrica. I'm from District 18 here in Boise, and I'm representing myself, and I oppose SJR 101. I want to agree with the previous commentators. I don't think the proposal is worth the time or the money it would take if it came out of the committee. And I think it causes more problems than it solves. So I just wanted to ask you to please reject SJR 101.
Thank you for joining us. We don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to try Donald Schaff. I think even the internet's getting tired. Hello? It shows you're muted. We can't see you in a chat. It shows you're muted, sir. Hello?
Yes,
Can you hear us, sir?
yes, sir, I can.
We can't hear you hardly. Speak up all you can.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Guthrie, the committee. I had a prepared statement that basically agrees with the other people opposed to the amendment going on to the floor. I do have an observation, however. I've been in Idaho since 1973, not always in Boise, where I live now in District 16. Ballot amendments rarely fail in Idaho. I think the assumption is if the legislature thinks it's a good idea, I'll vote for it. I think you should head this one off. I'm opposed, and I wish for you to vote nay to move it to the floor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. We'll try Patty Bowen. So can we take a phone call? Okay. Good morning.
I was trying to help someone else sign up. I wasn't actually trying to testify myself.
You're Patty.
Yes.
Do you want to testify?
Sure. I think I think a lot of really smart things have been said already. I think the one thing I'll say is I agree with what everyone has already said, which is that I think that this would allow one district to veto a bill overall, which could actually be really harmful to some of our rural districts. So urge you guys to vote now.
Okay, and we had you down as virtually, but no, you're in person's always better. I'm going to try Kirk Hinsberger on the telephone. We'll see if for nothing else to see if our telephone deal will work. Kirk, can you hear anything yet? Kirk? Doesn't appear. I think we've pretty well exhausted things. Senator Okonowitz, you want to come up and close?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Okonowitz, Legislative District 3 again. I'm not going to talk about everything. There was a lot to discuss, but I do want to remind folks, I think probably you all know, but maybe some folks in the audience don't know, that Citizens United was a federal court case that really limits our ability, probably eliminates our ability to deny outside funds from coming into elections in the state. So that, we wish that was an option, I would say, for most of us. It's simply not. And then, the obvious, I guess I'll just state the obvious. We're not voting to approve this on our own. We're simply voting to put this in front of the people and let everyone have a bite at it and see if this is something they think they want to do. They could very well vote it down. I think asking you to deny the people an opportunity to vote on this measure is a little counterintuitive from the folks who purport to be in support of the initiative process. So I'll close with that, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Don't see any other questions. Committee, as we kind of put this to the committee for consideration, as we do that, I want to thank those that have come in, especially through the snow this morning, and being a part of the process. I really appreciate it. I know the committee does, so thank you for making the effort. Committee, SGR 101 is for our consideration. Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send SJR 101 to the floor with a recommendation, with a do-pass recommendation.
Oh, why am I not
Motion by
surprised?
Senator Den Hartog, second by Senator Taves, that SGR 101 be sent to the Senate floor with a recommendation that do pass. Discussion on the motion.
They sure listened,
Mr.
didn't
Chairman,
Senator Den Hartog.
to speak to the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the close from Senator Okonowitz.
they? Yeah, what about the 2 hours of people
As
that
we continue
did?
to debate and discuss this and consider the initiative process, I
2,000
think it is
people
important for us to know that
worked on those
the
initiatives.
part of this process,
Unpaid. I was one
because
of
it is
them.
a constitutional amendment different than what we had considered in 2021. This ultimately could be decided by the people of Idaho, depending on its ultimate fate through the entire legislative process.
Corporate,
And then I will
dark
just
money.
make note, have a lot of the same concerns as the people who've testified today about the effects of out-of-state money
Yeah,
on our initiative
it
process.
doesn't out-of-state money, it's in-state money.
We've
Well, it
seen a lot
is,
of
it's
that in the
corporate
last several
money,
years.
lobbies.
And we
Check
are
out
working, I think we're
Secretary
going
of
to see
State
other
Sunshine
efforts this
Report,
legislative
$64
session to
million
provide additional sunshine
funded
on where
the
those funds are
Republican
coming
1,400
from.
candidates.
Senator Okonowitz was
every
right
2 years.
that Citizens United case does tie our hands in a lot of ways, but we
when
have
Citizens
work
United
to do
opened
and
up
we
that
have
door.
opportunities available to
So,
provide additional
I
sunshine
think
on
Moyle gets
where those funds are coming from
$100,000.
And have an understanding
And
of
then
how they're
they repealed
impacting
the Citizens
our
Initiative
democratic
of
process.
1996 of 8-year term
Senator
limits
Shippey.
in 2002.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Moyle
the
can
Idaho
serve
citizens,
28 years.
The only path for them to be able to have a voice or vote on a constitutional amendment is through this process right here, for it to be proposed by the legislature. And it is a heavy lift. 2/3 of each body must pass it. But there are probably a lot of issues that the citizens of Idaho would like to have put before them. That does require, obviously, us to pass that through. I do believe the bill sponsor is trying to give the Idaho voters a voice on this issue. Even if this were to pass by 2/3 in House and Senate, it wouldn't immediately take effect. This would go before the people of Idaho. And so in using some of the arguments that have been made, and I really appreciate everyone providing testimony today. Some of the arguments were our vote is our voice, that the people of Idaho would not be able to make an informed decision, would not have the ability to make informed decisions on this if it's not put before them.
You guys, what you do is you send out the $5 postcards.
The people of Idaho can be trusted to make good and informed decisions on the ballot.
$5. You never meet with people.
To this as well.
Very
do the people of Idaho not deserve to have their voices heard on this?
Like the
and the only way for the people of Idaho to have their voices heard
the Citizens Initiative,
is if we pass this.
I was one of them.
2/3
I knocked on a lot of doors.
2/3 in the House. Otherwise, the people of Idaho will not have a voice on this. And so I just want to echo a lot of the arguments that have been made that the people of Idaho deserve a voice. And we can trust the people of Idaho to make a good decision. If we don't give them this opportunity, we are denying them that ability to make a good informed decision on this.
All right.
Thank you.
$64 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be voting no on the motion.
Good for you.
I'm I suppose kind of a unique person. I love having the debate, and I think it's good for democracy. And I think having these issues go in front of people is important. Here's where I have concerns. If we wanted to put this issue before the people, and it said that if you vote yes on this matter, this constitutional amendment, you will be eliminating the initiative process from the Constitution, I would be fine with it, because that is what is going to happen if it passes. What I think the problem here, and what you're hearing from many of the people that testified, is people aren't going to realize that is what is being put in front of them, and it really could be. The language could be that simple. All right. Now, why do I say that if we're clear-eyed about this, the standard we're putting in the Constitution is going to eliminate the constitutional right to initiative? Well, the initiative power is given to the people in Article 3, Section 1. We can look at that language, and if we look at Article 3, Section 1, it starts by saying the legislative power of the state shall be vested in a Senate and House of Representatives. So the legislative power is vested in them. The people reserve to themselves the power to approve or reject at the polls any act or measure passed by the legislature. That's the referendum process. And then the next paragraph, the people reserve to themselves the power to propose laws and enact the same at the polls independent of the legislature. That is the people's power. This initiative, or this constitutional amendment language, would make the use of the initiative process so difficult that it would essentially just be dead letters in the Constitution. I say that based on evidence we have received from people who have actually used the process. They tell us that making a requirement of 35 out of 35 districts will render the process unusable. I base that on the fact that it just doesn't take an election genius to recognize that if this is the process you put in place, that a special interest group can come in and target one legislative district, spend all their money in one legislative district and get that district to essentially veto what the other 34 districts might want to put on the ballot. And finally, the Idaho Supreme Court that took evidence and considered this issue and understand constitutional law, determined that by requiring 35 of 35 districts, it would take a perceived fear of the tyranny of the majority and turn it into an actual tyranny of the minority. I just don't think that was a difficult determination to make. The language they were talking about, the very language that is in this constitutional amendment proposal back when it was in a statute. The cruelty of this effort is that it asks the people of Idaho to eliminate the initiative process themselves without really letting them know that's what you're about to do. So if we would change it and have a straight up debate, do you want the initiative process? That's a fair discussion. That's one that people of Idaho can have fairly and determine what they want. I think, though, that the reason we're not doing it that way is because we know the people of Idaho would say we love our initiative process. They would not want it taken away from them. That's the right question, though, that should be asked. The legislature should be working to protect the people's fundamental rights, not finding ways every time the people use that right to make it harder to use the next time. And in this case, make it impossible.
Before we go to any more discussion on the motion, I just want to offer an apology to Senator Ruckty. Early on in the discussion, when the questions were going back and forth to the bill sponsor, I kind of redirected his question about referencing, but it was totally appropriate because he was referencing a Supreme Court case that was relative to the deal, and I kind of cut him off a little bit on as he talked about doing a ballot initiative to repeal it entirely. So anyway, Senator Ruckty, apologize for that. And I've seen Senator Adams' light on. You good? Senator Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Okonowitz. Thank you for everyone that's been here this morning testifying. It's snowy outside. It's nice and cold. There's some folks that talked about walking in the cold, and this morning I appreciated the fact that you guys chose to walk in the cold and to provide your opinions. I appreciated the comments from Mr. Stephen Key. His historical perspective was on point for this discussion. I also appreciate the comments from the gentleman from District 8. I didn't catch your name, but we spoke in Senator Carlson's office a couple of days ago, and how much better it would be if we approached legislation with more thought and reason, not only this legislation, but all legislation. I've been going back and forth on this one because this is a meaty, heavy issue, super important. I understand Senator Okonowitz's intent. I also understand and respect the thoughts and the discussion this morning against. We had a forum recently, sort of a town hall in my district in 21. I represent District 21, Meridian, Idaho, Ada County. And one of the questions in the town hall was simply this: my thoughts on this initiative process. And this is what I said. The initiative process is the only constitutional mechanism that our Idaho citizens have to take action against something when their legislators aren't listening to them. It's that simple to me. It really is. And I can't tell you how many people in that town hall after I was done came up and said, thank you. You're exactly right. I have to listen. And I'm sure there's constituents in District 21 that are in favor of this motion. One is Mr. Butterworth. He's sitting in the audience right now. And I respect the heck out of him, but we may disagree on this one. And that's okay. That's okay. I have a lot of respect for him and others who worked hard on Prop 1. I was against Prop 1, and just sort of proves that the initiative process works, in my opinion. So
you and Vandersea are in the same boat.
With that, I'll be a no this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Adams.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't going to say anything, but you convinced me.
Boy, I must be a good salesman because I didn't say anything.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to speak briefly to the motion. I agree with Senator Burnt. Ballot initiatives, the purpose of the ballot initiative is to ensure that citizens can bring issues before their legislature when their legislature is unwilling to take up the topic. In my time in the legislature, on multiple occasions, I've had to defend the ballot initiative process, which I support. However, we are in a time of a lot of change in the state of Idaho. And 18 districts, as the state grows, is turning into essentially 3 geographical city areas and excluding a lot of the more rural areas.
Here we go.
I do see the concerns
He was raised in the
brought
Soviet
forward
Union.
by folks. I mean,
He
they're
did that
valid.
when he said he for the
But I'm going to
EBT
support the
program.
motion, Mr. Chairman, to send it to the floor.
Yeah, he was
for the reason that I think the
he
conversation
turned
needs to
down
continue.
the summer lunch program.
And
he said it
I
reminded
think it's
him of
important
the time he
too.
was raised in the Soviet Union.
It's been discussed
So he's a
that
Russian.
this is
It's his
this
heritage.
ballot initiative
Actually
process
lived
was
in the
brought
Soviet
forward by
Union
the writers
in
of our
Russia.
Constitution. And yes, it was amended in 1912, but it was not in the original Constitution of the state of Idaho.
Yeah.
That was ratified by the people in 1889.
I wouldn't be
That was
surprised
during
if this isn't
when this was ratified, when this was brought forward. It was
he's
during
got a lot
a
of
heavily
ties to
progressive era of American history, and
or at least Putin's family.
someone earlier testified, a republic, if we can keep it. Direct democracy is not a Republican form of government. And so I think that's something that maybe
Charles
needs to be
Koch.
talked about a little more. And I'd like to see the discussion continue.
American Legislative Exchange
Thank you, Mr.
Council.
Chairman.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for a final thought here, we have some of the greatest people in this nation, in our state. The state of Idaho has some of the greatest people. I believe we can trust this issue to the people. I think the people of Idaho will make a good decision on this, and I just don't understand why
Yeah, all
we're so
kinds of money
uncomfortable
like
with the people of
Vandersloot's
Idaho
money
having the final say on
that,
this and having their
he spent
voices heard.
for
So
killing
I really
the,
think that we can
open
trust the
primaries.
people of Idaho on this, and
And he called
because
the
of
ranked
that,
choice
I
voting
will
the
be a yes on this
hamburger
motion.
candidates.
And I'm going to offer a couple of comments myself. I've been here for a while, and over the years, I've had the opportunity to vote on several of these measures where I remember voting on the bill in favor of the bill that went from 12 to 18. That was quite a few years ago. I think it was mentioned today that seems to be some consensus, at least, that that's not a bad place to land on. I also am not oblivious to the court challenges and things that have happened in particular. And before that, when you consider the couple of bills that were passed that I voted against that the governor ended up vetoing a few years ago.
You didn't see this
And
Mr.
we had the
Guthrie out there
Supreme Court
knocking on
case
doors. He
that
never knocks on doors.
Was pretty pointed in their
He gets
decision on what
$75,000 from
how
about
they felt about that
50
particular
corporate
measure that was
lobbies and
passed.
PACs. I should
One
know,
thing
I
that
ran
hasn't
against him a
been
bunch of
maybe
times.
touched on too much is the cost to put it on a ballot. It's a couple $100,000, and also as this money comes in
Let's see if he
from
does.
out
He
of
might.
state or in state or wherever it comes from, that's real money that's being spent in our
Okay,
economy
here we
that
go.
maybe could go to support some other things that we'd want to consider, because it is very expensive to put a ballot measure on, and this would be an emotionally charged issue to put on the ballot. We talk about a lot of outside money coming in, and we also talk about the people that are out there in the snow and the rain and gathering signatures. And yeah, maybe that sounds a little bit about walking to school both ways uphill in the snow, but the reality is there are volunteers out there that are
I was
working
one of them.
hard because they believe in something. They're
I don't think you were.
sacrificing other things that they could be doing. And while some see the out-of-state money as the boogeyman, that boogeyman's not going to go away if we pass this. And I guess my default is belief in the citizens out there that walk in the streets and believe in something enough to invest themselves in something. So I'm going to oppose the motion.
All right, Jimmy.
You know, and the other part
Good
of
on
this
ya.
is there's serious voter fatigue or issue fatigue on this. I mean, since I've been here, it's been a handful or more of times, and there's 2 issues over in the body across the rotunda that are being considered on the initiative, and I just think we've worn this one out. So I'm going to be a no. I don't see any other Again, we do have a motion by Senator Den Hartog, second by Senator Taves, that SGR 101 be sent to the floor with a recommendation that do pass, and I'm going to ask Catherine to call the roll.
Senator Recti. Shippey. Adams. Den Hartog. Taves. Harris. Burnt.
Nay.
Guthrie.
No.
He knew it was going to pass.
5-3.
That motion carries 5-3. Again, we appreciate